The friends of the Nazarene became united, and I became enraged, and led us slaughter zealously. I found their secret places. They were beaten, they were chained, but some of them were scattered, justified in fearing me. Then the man in white appeared to me in such a blinding light, it struck me down, and with its brilliance took away my sight. Then the man in white, in gentle, loving tones, spoke to me, and I was blinded so that I might see the man in white. Hello, welcome back to the Nook. I'm Daniel, and what I just read to you was a song by Johnny Cash, who wrote this book, Man in White. So you probably know Johnny Cash from the amazing musician and singer that he is, but you might not have known that he wrote a book, and The Man in White is about the Apostle Paul. And I'll just give you a bit of a history here. I've never been necessarily a Johnny Cash fan. I respected him always because of his faith. I'm a Christian, and I know he's a Christian. He was a Christian too, but I never really jived with like the folk country music. But the one song I've always connected with by him is a cover. He covered the Nine Inch Nails song called "Hurt," and his music video is very powerful. It's very emotional for a lot of people, and I love that song. So I do have a lot of respect for Johnny Cash. I'm just not like some mega fan, but a friend of mine was telling me about Man in White, about how it's about the Apostle Paul, which I do love the story of the Apostle Paul. And I was intrigued. I thought, wow, Johnny Cash writing a book, this should be good. And essentially, another friend who was with us had heard about it. And as a belated birthday gift, he gave me that book. And it's a short book. It's just under 200 pages. So if you're interested, it's really, you don't have to commit to much of a read. And it's very good. I thought going into it that Man in White would be sort of this theological, and it is theological, but I thought it would be Johnny Cash just talking about Paul. But it's actually Paul is the main character in a third person narrative telling his story. So if you didn't know, his name was originally Saul, and he later became Paul, and he used to persecute the early church, and then he became a Christian. But before I kind of jump into this book, I just want to say I read the intro that Johnny Cash wrote. Johnny Cash wrote an intro about writing the book and being inspired to write the book, and he almost didn't write it, and he actually almost died in the midst of writing it. It's pretty crazy. I read in the intro that Johnny Cash, I guess he owned some property where there's lots of animals, and he was out for a walk. This was during the time where he had been writing The Man in White. He was out for a walk, and an ostrich attacked him. I think it kicked him with both feet. He broke like 3 ribs. And yeah, it was pretty crazy actually what happened. And because of having the ribs broken, because of his condition, he was hospitalized, but he was put on painkillers. He would take the painkillers, and then he would take sleep drugs to help him sleep. And eventually he became so dependent on those drugs that it caused health problems. And he was hospitalized again with internal bleeding, and he almost died. And basically, he had almost given up. He thought, I'm not going to finish this book. And then he did. He wrote The Man in White. And what is Man in White? Well, now that you've heard the intro about Johnny Cash and the process, yeah, so it's the Apostle Paul, who is known as Saul. And Saul, you find out about him in the book of Acts with the early church. And Saul was a zealot. So he was a Pharisee. He would follow the policies of following God, following the scriptures. But a lot of the Pharisees didn't believe in Jesus. In the scriptures, Jesus came into the world and he was preaching to people, and the Pharisees were always opposed to him. And so Saul, after Jesus' death and resurrection and ascendance to heaven, he finds out about these Christians, these people that are following Jesus, the Messiah, and he wants to put a stop to them. And what Johnny Cash is so good at, and I'm realizing he had really good prose, really good writing, when he was writing about how zealous Saul was, to the point where there's this disciple named Stephen, or one of the church members named Stephen, that's sentenced to stoning. And Johnny Cash did such a good job of writing Stephen as this, or writing, I should say, Saul as being so angry at Stephen for daring to believe the Messiah, Jesus, that he threw a goblet at him, which I don't think that was in scripture, but Johnny Cash added that. He was so enraged, he just wanted to see Stephen stoned. And, he'd be quoting scripture while he's plotting to just kill these people. And there's a powerful part where Saul, he's a bit troubled because he's been killing these Christians, and he's beginning to feel the weight of it all. And he's quoting scripture, and another priest, this is one of the most powerful moments, another priest in the middle of Saul quoting these commandments of God, the priest quotes, "Thou shalt not kill." And that kind of rattles Saul because then he's like, wow, so now I'm a murderer and I'm going against scripture. So, with all this in mind, Saul decides he's going to go and arrest a bunch of Christians. So, he's on the road to Damascus. And this is one of the most famous parts of Saul's story where he's on his horse, he's got some servants with him, and there's a blinding light. And the light knocks him off his horse, and he's blinded. But before he's blinded, he sees Jesus, who in the book they refer to him as the man in white. He's wearing all white clothing. And Jesus says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he says, who are you, Lord? He says, I am Jesus, the one you're persecuting. And that's when Jesus kind of gives Saul this idea of coming to him and spreading the news of the gospel to the Gentiles, to the non-Jews. And Saul right away goes from being zealously against the Christians to becoming one of them. And at this point, you see he's still blind. He ends up at someone's house. This person lays hands on him and he gets his sight back. So, yeah, as you can see, I'm not really dancing around spoilers here because this is all in scripture. A lot of you might have read this, some of you haven't. But it's a really good story. It's really well written, and you get to see his workings in the church. Of course, as you can imagine, this was in scripture as well, where Saul has persecuted the church so long, and now he's coming to them as believers. They're pretty suspicious, these other believers, because they think, well, this is the guy who wants to arrest us. So you get to see how he ends up telling them, no, I'm on your side. I'm a follower of Jesus. And I mean, what can I say? It's a very powerful book. I absolutely loved reading it. And just a shout out to my friend who gave me it for my birthday. I won't mention his name. He wouldn't want me to mention his name. But just a really solid friend of mine from my church gave this to me, and I really appreciate it. So if this sounds up your alley, if you want to read a book by the man in black himself, I think you should definitely give this a read. Like I said, it's not very long. It's not a huge commitment. But I mean, yeah, I can't say too much more. I just basically outlined the entire story, so you kind of know what it's about. And I will just say it was very enjoyable. I very much like Johnny Cash's writing. I have a lot, even more respect for him than I did before now that I've read this, knowing that such a good writer he is. And so if this sounds up your alley, definitely give it a read. No matter your beliefs, it's a really good story. So remember to like and subscribe. And until I see you next time, you're always welcome at the Nook. Bye.